So you're thinking about starting a podcast, and you might be wondering, is it too late? Is the podcast world too saturated? Do I actually have what it takes to produce and grow a podcast that could actually contribute to my business? Well, my creator friend, I am glad that you clicked on this video because today I'm going to be talking you through everything that you need to know to start and grow a podcast in 2021. And I am speaking from experience as the host of a top 20 marketing podcast on the Apple Podcast charts. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my show Creator Club. Search it up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And in addition to hosting my own show, my team and I have helped dozens of clients launch and grow their podcasts over the years as well. So to answer your first question, is the podcasting market too saturated? In short, no. A lot of new creators stress that every possible podcast under the sun has already been done. How can I possibly have a new idea that's not already out there? But trust me, chances are if you have a specific enough niche or a unique enough perspective, there is likely an audience out there for you wanting to listen to your show. The world of podcasting is still growing every single year, and it is definitely possible to find your audience if you create the kind of content that they're looking for. To give you a sense of scale of what it really takes to have a successful podcast, take Creator Club, for example. My podcast gets about 2,000 downloads an episode, and right now we're sitting at number 19 on the Apple Podcast marketing charts. That just gives you a sense that you don't need to have massive scale in order to have a high-ranking podcast or podcast that's successful and contributes to your business. My podcast has gotten sponsors, it's also generated clients for the business, and it's not like I'm getting 1 million downloads every single week. So you can definitely see some success pretty early on with your podcast if you're consistent and you follow all the rest of the steps that I'm going to talk you through today. I just wanted to start out with that note about is it too saturated, because I think a lot of would-be podcasters are worried that there's not space in the industry for them, but trust me, there definitely is. The first step that you're going to want to take when planning to launch your new podcast in 2021 is asking yourself, how can you provide value with your show? The best podcast ideas are going to be found at the intersection of what you're interested and passionate about, what your audience is looking for, and what there is a gap in the market for. So what are people looking for that other creators are not delivering on that you have an interest in? That's exactly where you're going to find your golden podcast idea. And there's a lot of different ways to approach this. Just remember to make it specific, make it niche. Think about creating a show for a specific kind of person. So even if there's already podcasts out there talking about personal finance or fashion or dating, think about what other perspective you can bring to it that's different. So dating in a small town or personal finance for millennial women, for example. Narrowing things down is going to make sure that you find your specific target audience and that you stand out in your niche so that you can climb the charts, get more reviews, get more downloads, and eventually maybe even get sponsored or generate more interest in your business through your show. The next step is to decide on your structure of your show and your strategy for producing it. So what I mean by this is basically, do you want to have an interview podcast or do you want to do a solo show? And make sure when you're answering that, you think about what style of show you would enjoy most producing, what style of show your audience is going to get the most value out of, and what style you think you can bring your own unique spin to. If you have a specific message or goal with your podcast, what kind of format is going to get that across the best? Here's what I'll say, just a little bit of personal opinion. I think a lot of beginner podcasters immediately default to an interview show because they think it is going to take the least amount of time and be the easiest to make. That's probably true. If all you're doing is lining up interesting people to talk to and chatting with them about their journey, yeah, that's not going to take you as much time as writing out really scripted and strategic solo episodes. However, you probably aren't going to see as good a results either. With my podcast Creator Club, I script out high-value workshop-style episodes that provide a really clear takeaway that is obvious in the title. So when people are tapping on that episode to listen to it, they know what they're going to get out of it. That's not always the case with interview style shows. Now, there is definitely a way that interview shows can be done that provides a lot of value. I definitely see that on a number of marketing shows that I listen to, when the takeaway or the value that the guest is providing is advertised in the title. The host is asking questions to get certain wisdom from their guest. It's not just all about like, oh, who are you? What's your background? What have you learned? Or whatever. It's actually clear, tangible takeaways. And that's the really important thing. If you do an interview show, that you're being clear about what the audience is getting out of it. You might also want to ask yourself at this stage, do you want to have regular segments in your episodes? Do you want to have like a Q&A or maybe a review of the week? How do you want to structure your show? And make sure that you keep that somewhat consistent so that your listeners know what to expect. For example, the Creator Club podcast, I always like to start with a cold open, so I get right into the meat of what we're going to be talking about. I kind of tease what the takeaways of the episode are going to be, and then we go into our theme song and our intro. Then we go back into the review of the week. I always like to shout out somebody who has reviewed the show. It's a really great way to incentivize your audience to leave you reviews, which helps your podcast grow. Then I get into the actual content of the episode. So we kind of dive into the teaching or the workshop of the week. And then we close it with an intro and some theme music. So your show doesn't have to have that same format. You can do it however makes sense for you and what you're trying to provide to your audience. But keeping it consistent helps your regular listeners know what to expect and kind of get into that groove of listening every time that you upload. The next step is to develop your branding. So you're going to want to decide on a title for your podcast, what the artwork is going to look like, what your voice is going to sound like. I mean, kind of literally, it's probably going to be your voice as the host, but how do you want to speak on your podcast? Do you want to be casual conversational? Do you want to be a little bit more formal and scripted? These are the type of things that you want to think about and be intentional about based on your goals and what the point of your podcast is. I would also recommend at this point doing a little bit of market research, seeing what else is out there. This is especially important when it comes to choosing your title. Now, if you come across a title that's similar or even the same as what you're thinking, that doesn't necessarily mean you cannot use it. You kind of got to judge on, is the podcast that's already using that title currently active? Is it a high-ranking or popular podcast? Is it going to be difficult for me to appear in search if that's the show that people are looking for when they search for that? You can also use additional keywords to make your podcast show up in different subject areas. So for example, the Creator Club podcast, the full title is Creator Club Social Media Marketing and Content Creation Advice. So this helps my podcast show up if people search for content creation, which is actually a really good keyword as it turns out. There's not a lot of other podcasts that are using that keyword. So think about that for your own niche. What keywords or descriptors can you use that you can tack onto your title to make it so that your podcast is a bit more searchable? Because in the beginning, search is going to be a big way that people find your show. Finally, you are going to record your episodes. That is the next step in the process. So once you've either scheduled your interviews or written your scripts, it's time to record. If you're not sure about gear, I would recommend doing a little bit of research, but not getting too overwhelmed with it. Honestly, you can start recording with just your phone. You can edit it in a free audio editing software like Audacity. If you are looking for a microphone recommendation, my personal favorite podcast microphone is the Rode NT USB Mini. That's actually what I'm recording my audio on right now. It's what I use to record the Creator Club podcast. It's a really affordable, high quality option, but like I'm saying, you could just use your phone to get started. Honestly, recording on your iPhone, kind of in a little blanket fort, it's gonna produce really high quality audio. And after you have all of your episodes recorded, finally you are going to actually launch it. So you can use something like Anchor or Simplecast or your website if it's hosted on Squarespace or WordPress to create your RSS feed and submit your show to all of the major podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple, etc. And then honestly, I would recommend just going for it. Don't get too nervous or try to plan a big elaborate launch. Just start posting and do it consistently and make sure you come back every single week with a new episode, and over time it will grow. I first started the Creator Club podcast in 2019, and it's taken to mid 2021 to see the kind of numbers that I have. Obviously, it's grown alongside my other social platforms too, but it does take time. But if you are consistent, you will eventually see results. So just know that when you get started, you're likely going to be looking at least a year of consistent posting before you really start to grow an audience. If any of this process sounded a little bit overwhelming to you, do not stress, because we are here for you. At Creatorly Media, we help clients launch podcasts, keep their shows consistent by editing for them all the time. We also help launch, create podcast artwork, create intros and outros. So if any of those steps feel a little bit uncertain and you'd like some professional help, then head over to creatorlymedia.com to see all of our podcast service offerings, because we would love to help you out. Or let us know in the comments if you have any specific questions about the podcast and the launch process, because we'd love to make a video to answer that for you in the future. So thanks so much for watching, and as always, keep on creating.